So let's talk about this pen. This is the Kaweco Perkeo. It's a brand new fountain pen that was released sometime in 2017 by the German fountain maker Kaweco, and it actually borrows the name Perkeo from the German dip pen manufacturer Perkeo, which were making dip pens at the height of dip pen technology sometime around the turn of the 20th century. However, let's talk about this pen because this is not a dip pen, thankfully. This is a proper, fully functioning fountain pen. So the role of the Kaweco Perkeo is actually to be a full-sized entry-level fountain pen in the Kaweco lineup that is also somewhat similar in styling to the other Kaweco Sport pens in their line. And that's something that Kaweco has really been missing out on because the cheapest Kaweco fountain pen that you could buy was the Classic Sport or the Ice Sport, something like that, and they were around about $20, and they are both pocket-sized fountain pens. However, this pen comes in $5 cheaper at only about $15, and for that you're going to get a proper full-sized fountain pen. Like the Kaweco Sport line, it also comes in quite a few colours, and the colour schemes that they've gone with is to mismatch the cap colour with the body colour, and the 4 colour schemes you can buy include Bad Taste, Cotton Candy, Old Chambray, and this one. This is Indian Summer with a mismatched black cap and a dull yellow body. So, what we have here pretty much is a $15 pen that's made by a pretty high quality brand that's also made in Germany. So let's jump into the review and actually see how this pen works. So first of all, let's talk about the specs of this fountain pen. So capped, this pen is going to be about 13.9 centimeters long. Uncapped, it's 13 centimeters long, and posted, it is 16 centimeters long. And in terms of the weight, it's going to be about 7 grams unposted and 13 grams posted, which means this is a pretty heavy 6-gram cap. So in terms of the length, I'm pretty happy with the length because I was always a little bit on edge with how long the Classic Sport length was, and I'm pretty sure that the 16 centimeter length is pretty good. For me, I can use this pen pretty easily uncapped. However, I do think it is pretty much on the lower end for what I'd like to use in terms of the weight. And usually when I use this pen, I will always cap it. And 13 grams is not all that much better. It really is on the bottom line of what I am willing to use. Now, one annoying thing about having it capped is there is a little bit of a step up from the barrel to the cap. And I understand why they've done that. It's because this cap is very similar styled to the Kaweco Sport, and they wanted to style it like that. But honestly, it's a very basic and very entry-level pen, and I do think entry-level pens should really value, ergonomics over, styling, and I do think it wasn't all that necessary to have a cap styled like this, but that's what they've chosen to do, and honestly, the step up isn't all that amazing to use. It's nothing awful, it's sort of rounded, but after a while, my hand does rub up against the cap, and it is just a little bit annoying to use. So if you look at the grip section of this fountain pen, you can see they've gone for a 3-faceted ergonomic grip. And in my opinion, I do think the term ergonomic grip is a little bit of a misnomer because I don't find them ergonomic or comfortable at all. And in my opinion, I'd rather have 2 facets, one on each side like the Lamy Safari, rather than have a 3 facet like on this pen, because honestly, when you use the Lamy Safari, I do find there is a little bit of wiggle room to find a comfortable gripping position compared to a 3 facet, because on a 3 facet, there's not much room to play around with how you can grip it. You're really forced into this one grip, this one tripod grip, and I just don't find it very comfortable because that's not really my grip. If I try to use a different grip, it just feels very odd, and there's just it really just wants to roll back into the tripod grip. Now here's the thing, this 3-faceted grip is actually pretty light. Compared to the Lamy Safari, which takes a big chunk out of the grip, this one is very light, and a lot of people who don't like faceted grips are saying that they actually do like this one just because it's not very, pronounced and it's very light. However, in my opinion, in my experience, I just don't find it very comfortable to use at all. But as I always say with these fountain pens, if you can try them out in the store, please do so. If we look at the rest of the body, you can see that this fountain pen is made out of not exactly a tube, but it's actually made up of 16 facets like the grip. And the 16 facets are actually pretty cool because what they do is they catch the light in a pretty spectacular way, and I just think it's a pretty cool addition for a pretty low-end fountain pen. If you have a look at the body, let's talk about the plastic, because this is a fully plastic fountain pen, and on their website they just say plastic. They don't allude to it being anything specific, and I don't think it's acrylic, and I don't think it's ABS. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's pretty strong and it is pretty durable. I would definitely say that the Lamy Safari feels a lot more durable and a lot more higher in quality, but this one isn't lacking anything. I've used this since Christmas, and honestly it has pretty much evaded any light scratching. And one reason that I might say it has avoided scratching more than any other fountain pen is just the way that the light catches this fountain pen and the way that the light works with it. I think it sort of masks any light scratches that this pen might get. If you look at the back of the pen, you can see engraved on it is Germany in really fine writing to show that this is a pen that is made in Germany and it should be made to a pretty high standard. Also, you can also see a breather hole, which crushes the hopes and dreams of anyone who wants to easily eyedrop this pen. And I honestly don't understand why they make these breather holes. I do find them pretty pointless, and if you are a fountain pen designer, you should understand that people want to eyedrop your fountain pen, considering that everything is plastic. So if you do want to eyedrop this pen, you might need a little bit of glue just to seal up the end. But out of the box, no eyedropping. If we move to the threads of the pen, this is something that I can actually really commend this fountain pen on, because look at the thickness of the threads on this fountain pen. They are probably one of the thickest thread sections that I've ever seen from a fountain pen. Absolutely amazing. I'm pretty sure this pen should be able to withstand quite a fair bit of stress on the threads without breaking, so props to Kaweco for that. I honestly think that more fountain pen makers should be doing these thick threads. It probably doesn't cost very much money to increase the thickness, and it will just make them so much more durable. If you have a look here, what you can see is a standard international converter, because thankfully Kaweco have taken the correct stance and actually used standard international on their fountain pens. So this actually is a Kaweco converter. However, I have a standard international from a Bayer fountain pen, and as you can see, it fits perfectly. So thank you Kaweco for using standard international in your fountain pens. If we take a look at the cap of the fountain pen, you can see the word Kaweco stamped onto the cap of the fountain pen, and you can also see the Kaweco logo in metal stamped onto the top of the cap, something that's really nice. As well as that, the cap is made out of 8 different facets, and I also think it catches the light really nicely. Now here's the one thing that I will say that this pen doesn't do very well, and that's the lack of a clip. And I also understand they wanted to make this style to be like the classic Sport, but honestly, in my opinion, this is a full-sized fountain pen, and full-sized fountain pens really deserve to have a clip. And I know they've gone for the whole, like the Sport, but here's the thing, this is an entry-level fountain pen, and I'm pretty sure people that are buying entry-level fountain pens really don't care about this being styled like the Sport pens, and they don't really care about the brand's history or anything like that. If you're buying a lower-end fountain pen, chances are you're just getting into fountain pens, and you just want a fountain pen that should be ergonomic and should be, targeted for functionality over aesthetics or anything like that. So I do think that Kaweco should have added a clip in this fountain pen, but that's one of the biggest things I can fault it for. So let's talk about the nib of this fountain pen, and one thing that I'll mention first is this pen only comes in a fine or a medium nib. I haven't seen a broad nib available either on their website, I haven't seen her on Jet Pens or Goulet Pens, so I'm not sure if they are planning on releasing a broad nib later on, but at the moment it's only a fine or a medium nib. And remember, these are European nibs, so they are going to be pretty big. This fine nib here, for example, is really a lot bigger than any other Japanese medium that I've used, and I'm pretty sure the medium is going to be a lot bigger. So in doing my research for this video and also being a part of the community for a while, I was aware that Kaweco is a company that really sacrifices the smallness of their nib for having a buttery smooth nib, and in a lot of cases they can accidentally overgrind their nib, which will result in baby's bottom or too much material being taken away from the tip in the center. This means it breaks the flow of the ink and causes hard starts and skipping, and I really have seen quite a few people on the forums rant about their nibs really coming out with baby's bottom. And I do know that there is an easy way to correct this with a little bit of sandpaper. There's heaps of guides on YouTube for doing this, but I don't think that in 2018, a company should be producing a product that has a percentage chance, and for Kaweco, a higher percentage chance than a lot of other companies for getting overground nib. And that's something that I was a little bit worried about when I got this pen. Thankfully, this pen does not have baby's bottom, and it is a very, very smooth nib. So let's talk about smoothness. It is incredibly smooth. When you hit the sweet spot of this nib, there is pretty much no feedback whatsoever. It's one of the smoothest nibs I've used, and it is really, really amazing. But if you listen to me, I did say sweet spot, because this pen does have a sweet spot that you really need to hit for it to be buttery smooth. So my sweet spot here is about here, well, approximately. And if you move the nib a little bit further up like this, it gets a little bit scratchy. I'm not going to say scratchy, but there is certainly a little bit of resistance, and if you move it a little bit too far down, there is also resistance, a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. You get my point. With a lot of other fountain pens, there's a lot of leeway in where you can use this nib, or use the nib, but for this pen, you really need to hit the sweet spot for it to be buttery smooth. In terms of wetness, I think this pen is above average in the wetness department. It's by no means a gusher of a fountain pen, but when comparing it to other pens that have a European fine nib, and I'm talking about the Parker Vector for example, this pen is certainly much wetter than that, and you can also see that in how often you have to refill this pen if you use it for an everyday carry pen. So when I used the Parker Vector as an everyday carry pen, I would be refilling it once every 4 to 5 days. However, when I use this pen as an everyday carry pen, I'll be refilling it once every 2 to 3 days. The ink doesn't last very long. And as well as that, when you use uncoated paper and lower quality paper, I think this pen tends to bleed a lot more than any other fine nib that I've used. In terms of flex, this is something that actually blew me out of the water, and it's something that I wasn't expecting when I first used this pen, because this pen actually has a decent amount of flex in it, and that's something that I wasn't expecting for a pen with such a small nib. And there certainly is a lot of contrast that you can get from thick to thin lines, and honestly, it's not very stiff at all. To be able to flex this pen, you don't have to apply much pressure at all, and that's pretty nice because you can get some nice line strokes and handwriting when using this fountain pen. In terms of reliability, I think this pen is certainly a reliable pen, but it's not the most reliable pen that I've ever used. Maybe once every 3 days or so, once every 2 days, I would get this pen out of my carry case after, not using it for the whole night, and I would start to write with it, and it wouldn't write. I'd have to undo the back of the pen, twist this maybe half a turn, just to get the feed saturated with ink, and then all the problems with it would go away. But it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is something that I do think I should mention. Not 100% reliable, but once every 3 days you might have a slight issue. Welcome to the writing sample for the Kaweco. Perkeo. This has the fine nib, and it's currently inked up with Monteverde. This is Rose Noir. It's a pretty watery ink, but as a result, it is really good for pens that tend to hard start. I think ever since I started using this pen with this ink, it hasn't really hard started as much as it did with an ink such as Waterman Rouge, and it shades pretty nicely. So let's get into a quick writing sample. And as you can see from that writing sample, it was actually pretty nice to work with. A few points in that writing sample I got slightly off the sweet spot, and you might be able to hear a little bit of feedback there. It was pretty good all round, no skipping or whatever. And the feed was able to keep up pretty well with the pen. As you can easily see, there is actually a little bit of variation from the side strokes, upstrokes and downstrokes. Certainly with the H here and the L here, you can certainly see that it is certainly darker because when you spread the nib, more ink's going to go down, but it is certainly much thicker than the side strokes on the T, and we'll also see that right here because this is the nib with no pressure, and this is me adding more and more pressure onto the nib. There is certainly quite a bit of variation that you can get with this fountain pen, something that I was actually pretty shocked with when I first inked up this pen. In terms of being able to keep up with fast writing, certainly can do that. It works pretty well. In terms of wetness, as you can probably see here, because this is pretty wet, but just to show you, it lays down quite a lot of ink, and if I spread the tines, it puts down heaps more ink. Even the ink here that I put down, what, 20 seconds ago, it's still pretty wet. In terms of reverse writing, it's actually not pretty bad. Oh, damn. As I said, it wasn't that bad. I did something which made it pretty upset. So, scratch that. Wow. Before that happened, whatever that was, I was going to say it wasn't that bad. A lot of European pens don't really reverse write all that well, but here it was actually alright until I dug the pen in. In terms of me referencing the sweet spot of the nib, it really is true. So here, this is the sweet spot. Absolutely no feedback whatsoever. It's butter smooth. But if I tilt the pen up a little bit more, it's a lot scratchier than here. As well as that, if I slightly bend the nib over and start writing, there's a lot more variation, and it's even worse on this side. I don't know how well you can hear that, but you really do want to keep this pen right here. And honestly, with this grip that I'm using, the lateral tripod, it's a little bit difficult, but in terms of, just using it for every day, you do sort of forget about it after a while. So, honestly, in terms of writing with this pen, I think it's actually pretty nice. If this pen didn't flex as nicely as it did, I think I'd, look down on it a little bit more, but because of the flex, which is just beautiful, I'm going to give this pen's nib a big thumbs up.